have a great context, we definitely need to have a good memory behind it. So let's talk about different layers of memories. Again, I'll refer to Koala paper. And the first memory is the working memory, and that is a short-term memory. So tell me a little bit about that memory for the audience, what it is, where it should be located, and the best practices.
Yeah, so good point or good segue. So think of short-term memory as like if you go back to that scratch pad that we talked
Yeah.
about of the chief of staff, right? It is the one that tracks the state of the current user interaction, or the one loop today, because everybody is writing loops as they're vibe coding. It's that execution loop. And what an agent that anybody is building today needs is to have that memory or set of instructions which can perform those step of multi-layer reasoning. Or let's say it can go and call 5 different functions, or it maintains a conversation between multiple systems without dragging useless artifacts that was probably interacted with this agent 3 weeks ago. So short-term memory is very, very well refined. It is very, very session specific. And it has always been very summarized, stripped of the you could say transient noise around it, and avoids going into the deeper layers, as we said, doesn't go into what happened 1 week ago, for example. And usually the best way anybody would architect a short-term memory is, let's say, technically, if I switch the gears now, if you go and use platforms like Redis, in-memory key value pairs, where you maintain the session states of what exactly changes, that's exactly what short-term memory would look like from a technical architecture standpoint. And you bring it back to a business layer like Salesforce or any other application, you always need to think about it as very, very task-specific, job-specific.
Yeah, I completely agree to it. So working memory is AI's train of thoughts. A lot of time people get confused with the context and working memory. So do you want to differentiate these two for the audience?
When you say context, you're typically even looking at what is being asked. It's the prompt that you're actually typing in right now. The working memory could be the in-session memory of what actually has happened in the agent's current interaction, like probably what you discussed with it 5 minutes ago. A good example is if you open up ChatGPT today or Gemini today, and let's say you put in a PDF and you want to ask some questions associated with it. Summarize this for me. It is a context. Beyond this thing, it doesn't know what summarize this for me means, because you're asking this in the context. The working memory is when you go down 5 minutes later, when you're asking a lot of other questions, you can still go back and say, can you rewrite the summary again? It'll continue to use whatever you've discussed and make up the summary all over again, because it uses the working memory's output, and then it can come back with a final answer. So that is how I would see as a difference for somebody who's just looking at, what is context versus working memory, as a bare bone difference.
Absolutely. And once the session is off, so the working memory, it is still active or it doesn't persist. Would you like to talk about this?
Good question. Technically, by definition, the working memory shouldn't persist after the session is off. But today, we could engineer it in such a way that the working memory could go back to becoming like the episodical memory, a saved session state. That's typically how we end up saving a lot of session states for our agents as well, where we can look back on what happened, why does this agent behave this way. So by default, it should end, and that is a session state for that particular agent's context.
So if you have to get anything which has happened before, you can refer this as episodic memory. The question it answers is what happened last time I did this. And a simpler version could be episodic memory is AI's diary. Not the facts. Not the facts. Actual experiences with a sense of what just happened and when, kind of thing. I know that you have built this before. What's the hard part? Is it deciding what is worth writing in the diary, or it is finding the right entry later when you actually need it?
I think it's the latter. It's the latter, because the moment we get into that zone, you'll start going into the next memory topic, which I know we'll talk about, semantic memory, because that's typically where more mature companies are wondering, how well should we refine this? Particularly when they are in, let's say, a regulated industry like healthcare and banking, they have to deal with all these compliances, SOC 2, and certain timeline beyond which the audit log shouldn't be maintained or shouldn't expire. All of this is very important, and none of this is written anywhere. And now the industry is now coming back to say, oh, maybe we should think of, this is what episodical memory should look like. When we start extending the muscle of episodical memory and make something else on top of that, that's where semantic memory starts emerging. So we'll ease into that topic as we go.
Do you think this layer is still getting matured? It is not mature
I think so. Yeah, I think so. It's almost like people are trying to evolve from their maturity.
Still learning about it. So you said that episodic memory is really the raw material, the experience that later became knowledge and skill. Episodic is what happened to me. Next kind is completely different. It is not experience, it is plain fact. So you know what it is. It is semantic memory.
Right.
And we keep hearing about a lot on this semantic. I think this is one of the mature layers, but instead of me saying that, I would like to know more from you.
I would say the one that we are about to talk right now is the one where companies and research labs are also paying a lot more attention and diving down. Because what's happening here with semantic memory is it's purely starts to become more fact-based. It's detached from general knowledge, right? It's, in this case, starts to become the agent's, you could say, encyclopedia of jargons that is very specific to that company, the domain knowledge that is very specific to that industry, the standards that you talked about, product specs. And when an agent needs to remember certain things, where you don't have to hard code a lot of that into the instruction. Like, nobody needs to type in what really should be the limits of SOC 2 compliance, for example, right? It should be part of the semantic memory of that agent. That the agent should be able to recall. Like, if you talk to an agent that works in a legal industry, it needs to know that you cannot do a certain appeal after a certain date of expiry from the initial filing and so on. That need not have to be an instruction or given in the context. It should be part of the instruction set, a system prompt level, if you could go to that. And in certain sense, it's almost like the absolute truth when you are trying to build an agent from the ground up. What is happening there and why this is important is this is the basis on which the whole retrieve augment generation even started, right? That is typically where you have a lot of documentation structure that gets stored, and knowledge graphs are getting built out of that, and hybrid search has evolved from it. So I would say semantic memory has developed a lot of legs today. It's no longer just one box. It's got multiple other sub branches. And there are many companies that have come up with different interesting product lines just using semantic memory as a concept.
Yeah. So episodic memory is what happened to me. Semantic is what I know to be true. Right? Yeah. One is experience. Another one, I would say, is the fact. And, like how you mentioned that a lot of companies have started building the semantic layer or semantic memory, and they might not even call it a semantic memory, but something is already existing in the system and practice, where AI looks up your documents and knowledge and provide all the information.
I think the semantic layer in itself, largely the first time we started thinking about semantics was how do you deal with certain types of data? How do you handle certain types of data types, for example? That started way back when we were defining the relational databases of the world, RDBMS. And from there on, we started to build cloud systems, and semantic layering became an important aspect of how you architecturally were building applications. Now, that semantic as a terminology is pretty much it's carried the same meaning. It's the fact of how to do this. How do you invoke this? And it is very, very topical, and some of it is very much embedded in how every company thinks. I would never put as there's a universal semantic memory. available outside. Semantic memory for Salesforce could be very different from the semantic memory layer or a semantics for SAP, for example. And I think that's where the protocols of the world are evolving. We've now started to see beyond MCP, A2A, agent-to-agent protocol. Agent-to-agent protocol a handshake between those semantic layers? Maybe. We don't know. The answer is it's still evolving.
So the next one, any guesses, Ajay?
I would almost say it's either a customer associated or you would probably put it as procedure oriented.
Yes. So the next layer or pillar I'm thinking to talk about is procedural memory skills. It is about how do you really do it? And it is the skills. These skills can either live in AI on its own or inside the model itself.
Yes.
So now we have got the full set. Episodic is what happened. Semantic is what's true. Procedural is how do I do it, actually. And some skills are written by the engineers and some the AI picks up and learn over the time. Okay. Explain from your vantage point on what level of development are you seeing in the procedural memory?
Sure. So as you rightly said, procedural memory is all about the knowledge of how to do things, right? Like it's the schemas and standard operating procedures and so on. And the question of like, why did we even think of yet another memory layer? Because semantics is about knowing the facts, as we talked about, and episodical is about remembering the past actions. But it isn't enough for an agent to know which API to call in order when to issue a refund without violating a corporate policy, for example. So this is where typically the procedural memory comes in. One thing that is often very important that people forget is this is the memory layer that's often or most of the time deterministic. And you don't want, and the reason why this was even thought of in the first place, going back to the AI research papers from Stanford and a couple of Oxford researchers, is you didn't want AI to hallucinate on how to write your SQL database function call. So that was the first time where they started thinking about this. And some of the examples of what is being brewing in this space, like we talked about Salesforce's implementation of agent script, which is the skill set now well defined to be more deterministic. That's where you are almost giving out that procedural memory of how to do this invocation. So there are tool calling, there is function definitions, if you go and look at, if you're working with OpenAI ecosystem, the OpenAI's function calling schemas, that's actually a procedural memory now model providers are providing. And if you go and work in an open source environment, like if somebody's using like LangGraph, the state machines that LangGraph provides, that's a procedural memory. And if somebody is using system level instructions, that is also a procedural memory. So, and if somebody is creating a model, for example, somebody is coming up with their own small language model, large language model of their own, the fine-tuned weights that you actually associate with the model, that's also a procedural memory. So it can take different shapes and forms, but I think to the use cases and examples that I talked about, OpenAI or Anthropic, for example, are working on, hey, how do we build our own long-term procedural memory for our customers, for people using the models? And the same way, application providers like us are thinking about our own procedural memories too.
Where do you think this memory maturity level is?
I would say it's still in infancy because it's not truly autonomous today. It still does tend to make poor choices in certain aspects where you have given complete control of choice and authority back to the model. You will almost have to see it going back to what I would love to see is procedural memory having a very strong dependency on the episodical memory and semantic memory to go and make the best decision. It doesn't always do that today. And I think that's why I'm saying it's still very much in its infancy.